Right, good afternoon, after lunch. Lots of caffeine, I hope, and that's just for me. Yeah, we're going to talk about Dora and bits and pieces of this. There will be a couple of slides that I'm going to gloss over quickly because they are possibly, we'll get to them and I'll explain about it. So what we're going to talk about is what is Dora, a bit of background for you, why it's important, how we, VMware, actually comply with Dora. That's a very interesting topic. How we use VCF to help you comply with Dora, which is even more interesting in my opinion. And we're going to open it up for Q&A and discussion. Relatively small group, happy to take questions at any point in time. So what is Dora? You have to have that. Copyright, so don't do that. So global regulations, they evolve a lot. We've got lots of regulations all around the world. Dora is just one aspect of this over on the far right. A lot of the things around Dora are actually being enacted in different geographies, including the UK, because let's be honest, we are not part of the European Union, therefore, why should we be interested in Dora? If you work with the, I don't know, APAC, similar sort of rules along these lines are all starting to be enacted over there. Funnily enough, the US tend to be the last in this space, unless you're kind of what some people call the north of the US, which is Canada, and the Canadians have got all sorts of similar sort of rules, problems, etc. So this is what's happening. There is an evolution of rules and regulations. Now, hands up here who is in financial services of any way, shape, or form. Cool. You're all, shall we say, the upper end of 20, so you will appreciate this. In days gone by, so my background is in capital markets. So when I joined in 1994, our genuine DR plan was to shut everything down as quickly as possible, close out the trades, chuck the traders onto Concord and start up in New York. That was accepted by the regulators. So, but things have changed. The Europeans, that's a true story by the way, things have changed quite significantly. So we have Dora. So broadly speaking, very broadly speaking, on the left-hand side, who does it affect? It affects IT, of course, because that's why you're all here, but it also affects finance, legal, and risk. It's pulling all of these people together, so you have to do this funny thing called talk together. It's a novel concept. I know the developers are involved as well. We have to all get together to do this. On the right-hand side, this is what actually the various pillars it talks to. You're going to have to be required to information share. Lots of people don't like that, but you're going to have to do it. Third-party risk management. That's going to be important, and you'll see why. Operational resilience testing. This isn't just about having a DR test in place. This is about full operational resilience. Incident reporting, something goes wrong, you've got to tell the regulators within a set time, blah, blah, blah. And then ICT risk management. This is the standard stuff. Let me jump into VMware compliance status. But before I do, who is aware of the terminology that Dora uses in terms of criticality? Two maybes. Terminology in Dora is very, very important. Are you a critical third-party service provider? Do you provide a critical important function, or are you non-critical? That really matters. Now let's just take this at face value. We're talking about providers here. This could be an application, this could be a third party, it could be VMware, any of those. So let's talk about VMware. This is the scope of Dora. Where do we fit within all this? I'll give you a clue, it's all the way down here. That's it. So everybody assumes that Dora is just about financial services. It's not. It fundamentally affects third-party service providers. Now, why is that important? And what do third parties, what is the obligation on third parties? You got to do all this. You got to do all this. You got to do, so you have to do a lot. So if you become critical in the eyes of the authorities, you as a third-party provider are going to have to adhere to a lot of these things. That's quite an onerous undertaking for some companies. So there was a bit of argy-bargy about, let's pick some random cloud provider somewhere saying, oh, we're not that critical, really, because as soon as you become critical, you then get oversight from the auditor, from the regulators, and they have teeth on this, really significant teeth. So what is a third-party service provider? It could be cloud computing. So if I go back, say, 18 months, because Dora should not be a surprise to people. It's been on the cards for quite a while now, but it's going to hit on January the 18th, just to be very, very clear. Cloud computing services, that's where most people were focusing around concentration risk and various things like that. It also affects data centers. Of course, that's quite critical. Data analytics services. Some of you might provide, depending on whether you're a customer or a third party, you can fit into a couple of camps here. Software. VMware clearly sits within the software camp. However, what parts of VMware are critical and what are not? Sneak preview, do not photograph it. This is not a legal statement. Each contract is done case-by-case basis. Talk to your account manager for further information. Okay, that's my get-out-of-jail-for-free card. However, broadly speaking, in non-legalese to the layman like you and I, VCF is DORA compliant. We are accepting that it is critical. We have got various modules to add to your contracts, etc., because when you talk to people about DORA, you have to involve legal, you have to involve procurement. We are in a position now that we can say that VCF is critical and we will adhere to these rules and regulations. That is quite significant because it allows you to jump through that barrier. No longer, when you come to us, it's not going to be purchasing or procurement coming to us and saying, oh, we need these. We've got it ready. We've done the due diligence. We know what we're accountable for, and we've got it. So that is the first thing that I want to talk about here, just to say that big tick box. But check with your account manager on case-by-case basis. Okay? Is that clear? How can VMware help you? So, a couple of big definitions here. And this is all taken from the DORA text. Concentration risk. Concentration risk is where it used to be the case that when you talked about concentration risk to a bank, and let's just say it's a pension provider or something along those lines, if you were doing this, you might have one pension pot over here, you might have another pension pot over here, because you're hedging your bets. But what happens if both pension pots happened to leverage Azerbaijani futures or something like that? You would then be exposed. No longer are you hedging, you're concentrating on one particular item. So this within the finance community has been known for a while, what concentration risk is. What's happening now is there was actually a paper brought out by the UK Treasury, if my mind serves me correctly, 18 months, 2 years ago, where they specifically called out the concentration risk within the banking sector in the UK. They specifically called out, I think it was AWS. If they lost, I know AWS never goes down, but it could, it might. But if it goes down, it's okay, because they'll give you some credit, so everything's okay. And I'm not poking fun, it's all about resiliency here, yeah? But if something were to go wrong, or let's just say, oh, I don't know, let's say Intel buys Microsoft. That's never going to, oh, hang on, Broadcom bought VMware. So things like this happen. And bear in mind, when you're architecting like this, you're architecting for 5, 10 years' time. You're not architecting for the situation now. You're architecting for the future. So you need to think about this. So when it comes to the concentration risk, what they discovered is if AWS were to go down, the UK would lose between 60 and 70% of retail banking. That's an issue. So they've obviously been talking to the banks, et cetera, to stop the various issues in the past. You won't, in theory, no bank is too big to fail. You won't get a Lehman situation again. They've sorted all that out, but they were identifying the real possibility that an IT, a third-party IT situation, problem, could bring the country to its knees. That's then systemic risk, that's then, critical national infrastructure, et cetera. That's where it came from. This is what concentration risk is about. First question? Sorry, I had to do that. Operational resilience. The operational resilience for that situation is have a good answer to a phone going off in the hall. But anyway, so operational resilience it's just good old-fashioned operational resilience. Let's talk about it some more. Big sign. So, operational resilience to you and I. I was driving up here today in an N+1 infrastructure. That's this morning. Genuinely, just added it. So I had a problem. I had a good old-fashioned puncher. Luckily, I'm driving an N+1 car. I don't have a little squirty tube thing, so I had a spare wheel. In fact, that's a spare wheel because it doesn't match that one, but we'll gloss over that. So I drive an N+1 infrastructure. Going home, I'm going to be driving an N+0 infrastructure. So if something goes, I think the technical term is peak-tong, if something goes peak-tong on the way home, I have to call it AA. Oh, hang on, That's now de-risking it further because I've actually got a contract with the AA to cover me. So arguably I've got an N+1 infrastructure for immediacy, but I've actually got an N+2 infrastructure for a different SLA. Make sense? I'm just trying to bring it round. What drives the operational resilience thing? Public cloud security. Everybody knows this. I'm not going to beat up the public cloud. That's part of it, but it's a bit more. Customer expectations. They demand more from things. They can't just say, oh, sorry, we've lost your data. Oh, sorry, it's down. I know it's 4 o'clock in the morning and my internet, my bank's down, but that's just not good enough these days. Expectations are higher. Regulations, we're talking about that. Data volumes, so much is happening now. We need to basically keep on top of it, and we need to be going all the time. You've then got minor detail of these two together, let's call it. Geopolitical changes and cyber attacks. What that means is wars and espionage. That's happening today. If you're in the financial sector and you talk to your security people, you know that you will be getting hit on a very, very regular basis. That's not even talking about trying to get your granny savings through all sorts of espionage. A random statistic that I picked up from a fraud conference, as you do, is something in the order of, I think it's about 17% of current fraud is romance fraud. I'll just leave that with you. So, how do we help? How does vSphere, VMware, VCF, et cetera, help? Well, we're kind of good at this. I would presume, how many people here have been using VMware for more than 2 years? You know this. This should not come as a surprise to you. If it does, you really need to be thinking about looking at this. I'm not going to go into this in detail, obviously, because there's too much. However, there are good things like intrusion detection, code signing, high availability. Those sorts of things are our bread and butter. We bring resilience. It's kind of our middle name. So when we're trying to protect your workloads as either a bank, a financial institution, or someone who is a third party to said financial institutions and has to give a critical service. So if I give you an example, there's I won't name them, but there's a small company that creates QSIP data for trading. They were born in the cloud. They do a really, really good job. They got a tap on the shoulder and basically told, you might want to look at resilience here. You might want to look at the operational resilience of this. Backup in one cloud provider is not good enough. You need to have a different way of doing it. By the way, we suggest you get something on premises. So that's actually happening today. I mean, admittedly, this is a very, very core part of the trading workflow as it goes, but things like HA, all of these things, they come together to provide this resilience. That's what they're wanting to do. So we will be able to put you in a position to provide your application with the best level of resilience to meet said regulations. Make sense? Just in case you want to actually do the due diligence and work out what part of VCF helps with what part of the Dora regulation, we've done it for you. That will save you a lot of time, effort, and fun, shall we say, late night fun. That's a lie. It's not November the 14th. We've updated it slightly. There's been a soft release of it. There will be a release, I believe it's straight after the holidays in the US, where we're doing a security release with a few updates. So watch that, and we will be pointing to this. Or just use good old-fashioned Google to Google it. Concentration risk. We've talked about what it is. How do we do that? So there are two things about concentration risk. And broadly speaking, it fits into stressed exit or managed exit. Stressed exit is the traditional thing that I had to go in at weekends and perform a DR test on. Now, when I did a DR test, we were actually pretty good at it. We literally pulled the power from the computers and just saw if it stood up in the biscuit factory. The biscuit factory was an ex-biscuit factory that was our dark site DR over in City Road in London. So that's what we did. We literally pulled it and we checked to see if every system would come up. We had to do that by law. I think it was once a year back then. The problem with that is when we tested it, it all came up brilliantly. What we didn't do is we didn't do trade flow testing. So the market data would come up beautifully and it would sit all there in the Technicron information bus, the TIB would be fine, and this would, but they didn't talk to each other. That was okay. We got through the regulation because we did our test, we did the tick. That's changing. We need to have a very robust operational resilience strategy to something going wrong. So something goes wrong in data center A, don't care where it is, cloud is an operating model, not a place. It goes wrong in data center A, it needs to come up in data center B in some way, shape, or form in the right time and right and timely manner. The other way is if you've got a managed exit. So a managed exit is a situation where I've gone all in cloud provider A, I really don't care who it is, or I've gone all in on this particular building in, I don't know, Docklands or something like that. And then you have a situation where I've run out of power in Docklands. That will never, it did happen. So you've got a situation there. Or your cloud provider, they've put the prices up, damn, okay. Or they've just been hacked, or they've been, I don't know, crazy, bought by the Chinese and we're not allowed to deal with them, or all sorts of geopolitical stuff that would cause, in maybe the next 4, 5, 10 years, because you're designing for the future, to give you, that makes you need that agility to move about the place. That's it in a nutshell. So the concentration risk is we, through the kind of, they don't like calling it a shim, but I call it a shim because I'm kind of geeky, technical, and mechanical. But there's a VMware shim that fits in that allows you to go from cloud to cloud to cloud. Obviously, I'm going to say on-premises, etc. as well. You can choose your provider at will. That allows you that very, very swift exit strategy when something happens and you have to manage the exit. It also has the advantage of you can do the bursty stuff and all the good stuff that we sell around multi-cloud, but fundamentally it gives you that seamless flexibility between multiple clouds. So that's it from a flexibility perspective. Is that making sense? So the good news is, my message is actually very, very simple today. I have to have that, sorry. We are VCF is compliant, and VCF helps you comply. Those are my very, very simple messages around Dora compliance. Dora is very, very complicated. Go and look on LinkedIn, there are multiple articles, and they, trust me, they delve into lots and lots of detail. But for us in the room talking about infrastructure, it's fundamentally about understanding risk, managing risk, not eliminating risk, because you can never do that. And if you think you can, you're smoking something. That's on recording, so never mind. It's about managing the risk. So with that, I'm actually done. And I want to deliberately open it up to the floor to see if there are questions. He's already there. And if there are any commentaries, and we can talk possibly off record if Gareth switches the camera off. So yeah, yourself.
So if you think about uptimes, more
Yep.
noise costs more money.
Yep.
Maybe we have to stretch clusters, but now we have to pay for calls both sides, even at IDMs. So the customer's going to push to reduce the price. The regulator was trying to increase availability. How's that mechanism work to land at somewhere where you're compliant, that you're at the right price point?
Two answers to that. The first is it's about risk management. Management is not about the elimination of risks, it's about understanding and minimizing it where appropriate. The next bit is a simple phrase called proportionality. So the proportionality law or terminology comes into the Dora text as well. So when it talks about proportionality, it's about two things. It's about what size of company are you? So if you're a large company, you will have to meet probably more stringent rules. Yes, absolutely. So if you're picking on HSBC or Lloyds or someone like that who are in the other room just now, they will have to adhere to some significantly more robust introspection on that. Whereas if you're a little mom and pop shop, as the Americans call them, who frankly, if you go bust, it's not that big a deal. No offense to any small mom and pop shops here. The regulators will be less interested in that from an operational resilience perspective. In terms of managing risk, bear in mind that this is not a blanket thing. We're talking about the criticality. So it's only about critical systems. You don't have to put the print servers on a highly resilient thing. Joking aside, you don't. Some people did. So back in the day when I was doing SRM installations and things like that, people would say, brilliant, it can all be protected. We'll chuck it all on SRM without realizing the cost implication. So it's a classic thing. And this is before I get into the VCXE designy type stuff. It's about understand the requirements.
Well, it's 15-minute replication that you might lose.
But precisely. Or do you want synchronous? Do you want asynchronous? Or do you just not really care if your print server has to be built from the ground up? It's about proportionality in terms of understanding what your workload is. And yes, that's hard because that means that from an infrastructure perspective, we have to talk to the developers. We have to talk to the business. One of the best ways of talking to the business is financially. And by that, I mean it's a carrot and the stick perspective. Yeah, sure, we'll give you 5 nines. Not a problem, it's going to cost you this much. Oh, maybe we don't need it totally. So let's go for a measured and pragmatic solution to this. So my print server, don't care about it, but the front-end trading database needs to be there. So if you're in capital markets, for example, there are certain things, so if you're a market maker, there are certain rules that you have to adhere to or you get a big amount of fine on a per hourly basis. You have to be in the market for liquidity. Those systems, they have to be as resilient as possible, no matter what happens. So when I was working in said big bank that used Concord as a strategy, the key thing is they closed out all of their positions so that they were de-risking themselves, which meant they didn't care about those applications. They chucked the traders over. What I didn't tell you is they also chucked a whole bunch over to Munich. And Frankfurt, the Frankfurt office, they would continue trading on a very, very small system to keep liquidity in the market. It's about understanding your business. That's the only answer that I can give on that one. Any other questions or comments?
Well, question about, you were saying earlier about people saying they're not critical.
Yes.
What's your definition of what is critical?
It frankly doesn't matter what my definition is.
Okay. What does the Act say is critical?
It doesn't. It's risk mitigation, it's risk analysis. It's about you to do the calculation between the propensity and the impact. And you multiply them together and you get a number, and then you rank and rate them. And your risk, not your, but the financial institution who would be fined in such a situation, they will be very good at managing risk. And when you manage that risk, it's literally doing that calculation. Well, it's probably never going to happen, but if it does, the whole business goes kaput. Ooh, okay, that's a bit of an issue. However, you get the middle ground. So in terms of criticality, what you will find is what we've done. Not every part of our product suite is going to be critical. It goes, that kind of makes sense. There are bits of our product, I don't care if it goes down. Will it impact your business? No, not at all. Things that are very critical tend to be things like, so if I give an example, if you look at the automation piece, and I'm not talking about VMware here, I'm talking about any automation tooling you use. If you have an automation tool that sits on premises and you use it just to stand up new machines, is that critical? I would argue not, because it is not critical for a production business. However, if you've got an automation process that is absolutely critical to do the end of day risk analysis for blah, 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 and because it relies upon the automation stream to etc., that would then be critical. What happens if it's a SaaS service? Is that critical? Quite often, yes. So you've got an automation SaaS service. Oh, hang on, that then means that all sorts of other stuff around the SaaS service becomes critical. So what you'll find is when you look at third-party providers, frankly, like VMware, like Google, like Amazon, all of the kind of interested parties, they will be defining certain things. They will be able to accept that onerous task of making something critical. We have accepted that VCF is critical because we're not going to get out of that one. It is critical. There was a time, incidentally, 12 months ago, that there was a perceived wisdom that on-premises stuff typically wasn't going to fit into that criticality bucket, but that kind of flipped slightly in the last 6 months because people have recognized that, yeah, just because it's on-premises doesn't make it any less critical. Just because you as an institution have control of it doesn't mean to say that it's less critical. So I know it's a non-answer. The perfect consultant answer is it depends, but it really genuinely does. Does that help?
It does. Maybe I'll expand a little.
Yeah, sure.
What I was thinking of is if you had a monitoring service.
Yep.
If monitoring service goes down, you know what? That does not affect production. Workload is still going on. End user's not going to care, but the regulator does.
Depends on the time. Genuine thing. What is the SLA to which you work to? So if that monitoring service is an SLA of it must be up at all times, that would be a significant number of nines. That's critical. However, what happens if, when it comes down, so look at my car. I've got an N+1 car, but I'm actually willing to take the risk of an N+0 because my SLA on the way home has changed. I don't have to get here on time for this. I've just got to get home and put the dog to bed and feed the dogs. That's it. So it's okay if I'm going to be another couple of hours. Poor dogs, but you know what? They'll live. So what I'm doing in that case is my SLA has changed slightly. So my SLA to get here is got to be here on time or else I get killed by Gareth and co. Yeah? That's why I've got an N+1 infrastructure. But I'm happy to take that risk going home with an N+0 infrastructure. So it's about that risk level.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure. There's no easy answer to these.
Like trading hours, yes. Within trading hours.
Trading hours, yeah. It's a really interesting thing, trading hours, but everybody's trading somewhere in the world. There are arguments.
Depends if it's just the, let's say, the LSE. It just has to worry about 90 points.
Yes. Apart from the fact they run risk calculations overnight. Ah, damn. Yeah, I had that problem where we started doing electronic trading. You're doing all the risk analysis, the bond, Monte Carlo simulations overnight and all of this stuff for the repo desk in the morning. And it's an end-to-end business. The workload shifts overnight and the SLAs shift. So for example, to take your point, if the batch job overnight to do the risk calculations for the yield to maturity curves, if that broke, I can rerun it, that's okay. We might be a bit late. What would that mean? It means we're exposed in the market for 2 hours. Is that a risk, and it's about quantifying that risk, that the bank is willing to take on? Typically, yes, frankly, because they had no choice, but they knew they were exposed. But that would change their investment decisions for that 2 hour period. So if something broke with a batch job overnight, the bank we would tell the desk heads, and the desk heads would know that they would run a different risk profile in their trading the next morning. These things happen with I'm obviously talking capital markets. It's going to be different with, say, for example, insurance companies. They do a hell of a lot of risk. That is their core job in insurance. But their SLAs are a bit different. Oh, I'm sorry, your quote got delayed a day. That's okay. Might lose a bit of business, but it's not going to break the insurance company. Yes?
When do you think the UK equivalent is going to emerge? And I saw it was in the King's speech.
Yeah.
That was just that it was like on the statute book now. There's no date for its publication or white paper or anything like that.
You mentioned 18th of January, what's that?
That's Dora. That's Dora for the EU. Bear in mind that does affect people in the UK if we do business with the EU, which, let's be honest, we're still tied at the hip. I don't have an answer for that. I did speak to that conference I went to around crime and financial crime and stuff. There was a very interesting chap who was up on stage on a panel with me who was behind the scenes the person who wrote a lot of that text for the previous government. Now, he was a bit annoyed because obviously the government changed and all his work had gone to pot, but he's going to be knocking on the door to try and get that through. It's in the bill. It needs to happen at some point. One thing, let me answer it a slightly different way and say that if you read between the lines, and do not take this as fact, you have to seek advice on this, but the word on the street is that although it is being enacted on the 15th, it's going to be a gradual introduction. That is to say that people will not get fined on day one. So it's a gradual process. It's exactly the same in the UK, and I genuinely don't know about when legislation comes in. Your guess is as good as mine.
From VMware's perspective, you are expecting the UK equivalent to be somewhat of a mirror?
Yeah. The short answer, yes. So I spoke to the Chief of Privacy and the legal counsel who's done our little module. Spoke to them yesterday, actually, and they were confident that it would require minimal changes to meet UK legislation as and when it comes out. You have to do the due diligence and everything, but the current thinking is it's not going to be dramatically different. So from our selfish perspective about our compliance of it, it's relatively straightforward to do. It's about accepting which bits are critical, VCF is critical, and then putting the terminology around it about what is required from that. And I don't think the requirements of the EU will, I can't promise it, but we don't believe it to be significantly different to what the UK PRA, etc. will put in place. No promises though. Anything else, or just even comment or lively debate? Or we can go and get coffee. I think you can say that.
I can back up what you just said about that legislation. From
Okay.
our side, we're covered by the Canadian laws as well.
Yeah.
And we've got Luxembourg UK legislation will be any problem to us at all.
I can't obviously say that for sure.
Nor can we, but that's what we are feeling
Correct.
on the ground as well.
And if you talk to the various people who are in your position across multiple banks, they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So there is strength in numbers there. Risk mitigation in numbers. Anything else, or is it coffee time? Coffee time. Thank you very much for your time.